Hello, and welcome to Thinking Solo, where we talk about ways to succeed in business and in life. I am your host, Ryan Derousseau. I'm a CFP and fee-only financial planner, and you can find me at thinkingcapfinancial.com or on YouTube at Thinking Solo and under my name on LinkedIn. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that is very difficult for many to discuss, and that's what happens if you are no longer here. It's a very difficult conversation for some and really hard for people to really delve into the implications because they can't really imagine them not there. But for when you are running a business, that is a really, really, really important thing to have in place, especially if it's a tool for income for when you're gone for your family and loved ones. And so it's not always the most fun topic, but it's an important topic. I can't wait to get started. Let's go. When we're talking about the estate plan for the business, what we're really talking about isn't just sort of unwinding the thing. It's actually to develop some control for you as the business owner once you are gone. And that controls can be so important because it can determine whether or not the business can survive without you, whether it's going to be sold without you, or if it's going to be sold, who's it going to be sold and how. And oftentimes family members are not the right people to make these decisions. One, you haven't really explained it to them. And two, they aren't the experts in your field. You are. And so without that a plan in place, like your value of the company goes down dramatically, and that would be a real problem for you long term. And if you are looking at this as a income source for your family, a real problem for your family if something were to happen to you. And so when we're talking about estate plan, think of it less of like what happens if I die and more about sort of how do I create control over this company long after I'm gone, so it is achieving the goals that I set out to achieve when I first built and began to build the company. One of the big reasons, the first reason to have an estate plan is so there is a clear line of tasks and management in control when you're gone. So, when you're operating on a regular basis, you may not be talking to your spouse or a business partner or project manager or any of those folks about sort of how the business should run if you're no longer here. And that's where an estate plan can really be beneficial because you can actually outline who's in charge, how they're in charge, what they're in charge of through that estate plan. Now, it doesn't mean you shouldn't eventually have these conversations with those people in charge, but nonetheless, the estate plan kind of outlines exactly how that should work, and it gives you the last chance ability to outline that line of delineation, and it ensures that the right people are taking over and have access to the assets available needed in order to keep the business running, particularly in the aftermath once you're gone, because there's likely going to be a bit of a shock when that happens. When you're looking at a estate plan, you really need to understand the sort of different documents at work. And often for businesses, the business owner is going to have both a business plan, documentation, sort of like what's going to happen to the business, how is it going to be sold, who's going to manage it. And then they're going to have personal documents as well. So wills are a big one. Healthcare proxy. So who's going to make healthcare decisions for you, and power of attorney, so who can make financial decisions for you. And that's going to be an important one for the business. Now, I will say that most business owners need to go beyond that because most business owners have more complex situations than a basic will with the power of attorney and healthcare proxy can provide. And so often that's a revocable trust of some sort where they can outline more detail of what what is going to happen when they're gone. And that should also be put in place within the parameters of the business operating agreement, especially if there's a partnership or other investors involved. And, but those are the basics because and the reason you want the trust over the will and whatnot is because that's still going to go to probate. Just because you have a will doesn't mean you're going to avoid probate, and you don't want the business to be kind of stuck in that loop for too long. And if things are not properly identified within the accounts, like your bank accounts and whatnot, it can actually really clog up the business. And so the trust also helps kind of circumvent that because you've already outlined everything and it doesn't have to go through the courts in order to finalize finalize the estate, and the business can continue to operate, even if something's happened to you. One of the big things that needs to be, discussed, talked about, and explained in the estate plan, and this comes up during these situations, and that's sort of what happens to the business when it's gone. When you're gone, is it going to be sold? Who's it going to be sold to? How is it going to be sold? So there are ways, let's say you have a partnership, that you can set up the business so if something happens to one of you, the other partner immediately purchases that percentage from the family, so the other partner can continue to operate. It's called a cross purchase agreement, and it allows you to negotiate the price of the business while you're still alive, because when you pass away, the business value could plummet, just because you are no longer there. If you were to go to an outside seller and they knew that you had just passed away and they are now negotiating with your spouse, who is not really a part of the business, they're not going to give that person, the spouse, the benefit of the doubt. They're going to see the value dropping, and they're going to price the business based on that. But if you put a deal in place to ensure that it's going to operate and that your family is going to be paid out for that business, before you pass away, you're standing on much firmer ground, and you're able to negotiate in a much better situation. And so that's a big reason to go through this whole process. Again, it's a different agreement beyond the estate plan, but part of the estate plan, because then if the spouse is purchasing or receiving the money, how is he or she receiving that money and getting the funds for the sale of the business? It's a big topic of discussion at that point. The other thing that can happen is that you have a line of delineation for your children to take over, but you still probably want your spouse or partner to receive some funds from that, or if they're the ones taking over, your children to receive some funds from that. And so that's another area where the estate plan ensures that clear delineation of how the family is going to continue to operate this business even when you're gone, assuming that they are continuing to operate it just like as if you were there, or have the skill set to operate such a company. The other thing to think about with the estate plan is that, and more so to realize, is that this thing is going to evolve and grow over time. When you are starting a business, the estate plan for the business may be very small because your business is very small and it's a very small part of your financial picture, even if it's a large part of the financial picture. It's not necessarily something that's going to be the retirement plan right now because you're not looking to sell the business, or it's not a sellable business because you haven't built it up that way. But maybe 5 years from now, it is now a thriving business that can operate with or without you, and therefore it is something that could be sold. And now the estate plan needs to evolve with it. So it's important to kind of take a look at how the business would unwind every single year or every other year. So everyone who's involved is aware and knows the plan, and they are comfortable with said strategy. And this will allow that business to, one, continue on beyond you if that's something that you want. But if it's not something you want or care about, ensure that you or your family has benefited and profited from the business when it's unwinding. If it's something that can be sold or pass on to someone else who can then take all your work and grow from it. And so that's really what we're doing here is creating that, but it's going to evolve as the business grows. And so keep in mind that what is working now may change in a year or two. That's really it for the estate plan at this time, because it's, we're just talking about very top level, but it can get really detailed depending on how detailed you want to get with it, between cross purchase agreements or plans to, or using insurance tools to fund a purchase in case you pass away, or things of that nature. It can lead to some really complex planning strategies, but ones that can really set up the business for success. And if you have a business partner, really protect both of you in case something happens. And if you have a family that's going to use this business as income for years to come, can really protect them. And whether that's using trusts or ownership shares or things of that nature, we can ensure that the right people are profiting from the business long term based on what you want today. And, considering you will not see the fruits of this labor, it's really near and dear to your heart as the business owner, because the reason we create these things is for our family and for ourselves and for the customers that we serve. And so this is really your opportunity to create that for a long time to come. Today's movie review is a movie that is a smash hit this summer called Obsession. It's a horror movie by Curry Baker, a young, it's famous because the amount of cost involved to create this movie was very little, and it's been a huge hit, making hundreds of millions nationwide, and basically being one of the big hits of the summer. And so finally it got to streaming, so I was able to catch it. I've been wanting to see it for a while. I'm a big horror fan. I used to hate horror, but now I love it. And so when I hear that like there's this really big hit in the horror field, like I really can't wait to see it. But because of children and whatnot, I had to wait till it got to streaming. But finally got to watch it this last weekend, and it's a really fantastic film with some really cool imagery, really cool cinematography, and really cool like eye for the camera by the director, because of the way he utilizes a certain, I don't want to go into spoiler territory, but he utilizes lighting in a way that's really interesting to kind of tell the viewer what's going on with one of the characters. And it's really fascinating how he uses it. I don't remember seeing it quite like that, or quite in that stark of a term. And so, it really stood out to me. I really enjoyed that part of it. But in terms of the story, essentially, on a basic level, a young man's really obsessed with a friend of his who wants to tell him, professes love for her and can never really do it, and instead goes a roundabout way of doing that, in which it leads to some obsessive territory on the girl's part. And but that obsessive nature is so real to the entrepreneur or the solopreneur's mindset, because when we get into these situations, all we want is for this thing to thrive. But if you do it the wrong way, like the young man in this, it can really backfire, and it can really turn against you. And really, what was a really powerful message is, if that obsession is faked, if it's forced, if it's not authentic, the business is going to suffer, your customers are going to suffer, the service is going to suffer, and therefore the employee experience and just the overall your experience in the business is going to really not thrive. And so it's one thing to be obsessive about a goal that you have, or a business that you have, or really anything, but it's another thing to take that obsession and not use it in a quality way, or a true way to what you're doing, because then you're going to get kind of the bastardized version of that obsession, in which no one thrives. And it's not really the point of the movie. It's more into the misogynistic nature of the relationship, as well as the inability to truly share one's feelings. But nonetheless, for what we do here, it was a small takeaway from an otherwise much larger film that's really, really worth seeing. That's today's show. Thanks for listening about estate plans, and then a short movie review on Obsession. Again, you can find me at YouTube at Thinking Solo. I'm online at thinkingcapfinancial.com, as well as at LinkedIn under my name. And be sure to subscribe. I'll speak to you next time. In the meantime, keep grinding.